Muito obrigada pela presença de todos vocês. Eu espero que a gente tenha uma tarde bem interessante, bem produtiva, que a gente possa compartilhar, né, nossas reflexões e nossas experiências. Agradeço muito a presença de vocês, a presença dos pesquisadores participantes do projeto Ler. Nós somos pesquisadores de um projeto chamado Juventudes, que se denomina Júpiter, significa juventudes, políticas, interseccionalidade e território. Bom, então agradeço muito por vocês estarem presentes. Hoje nós estamos recebendo o professor Nir Cohen. Ele é um geógrafo, chefe de departamento do Departamento de Geografia e Meio Ambiente da Bar-Ilan Universidade, e a sua palestra ele vai falar sobre os imigrantes e a condição enquanto cidadãos durante a pandemia Covid-19. Em nome do nosso grupo, a gente gostaria muito de agradecer ao professor Nir pela presença, pela gentileza de estar aqui hoje conosco. É um prazer recebê-lo e nós ficamos muito felizes em poder ter essa tarde de trabalho juntos. Well, good afternoon. Thank you. Thank you very much for being here. It's a great pleasure to receive you near here with us. I told them that you are geographer, head of Department of Geography and Environmental at Bar-Ilan University, and that your lecture you will share with us some of reflections on migration and urban citizenship during the COVID-19. On behalf of our research group, I'd like to express our sincere thanks to you for your kindness and willingness to be with us during these 3 days at PUC Minas. For us, a great pleasure to welcome you, to become acquainted with your work and to share reflections and inspirations. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Raquel, for the invitation and for being not just a colleague, but a friend also. And Vivi's here as well. Thank you for coming. Unfortunately, my Portuguese is not that good. I know maybe 10 words. I know a little more in Spanish, but not good enough to give an academic talk. So I will speak in English, but I will do it slowly because I think of it as more as a conversation, not as a lecture. Okay? So it's great to be here. Thank you for coming because I understand it's almost the end of your very, very long semester. So not easy. And then if you want to stop me at any point and make a comment or ask a question, or you want me to repeat something that wasn't clear, just no problem. Okay, think about it, like I said, as a dialogue and not a monologue. So I will maybe switch to the podium. Thank you. You will switch the slides, or should I? Oh, I can do it. Okay, good. All right. So let me start by saying that this is a project that is very much in progress. It was funded. The funding is finished, of course, but it was funded by the Volkswagen Foundation in Germany in 2020 and 2021. And I'll tell you a little more about the project in a minute, but basically this article or this paper that I'm presenting today is with a colleague of mine from Denmark, from Copenhagen, Tatiana Fogelman. And the paper is comparative, so we are looking at the experience of Copenhagen and Tel Aviv, but here I will only present my own case because I cannot speak intelligently about Copenhagen. Okay, so this is the framework, and what I want to do very quickly is to tell you where we are coming from, okay, conceptually. I want to present our two main pillars, right, of theory, if you will. Actually, it's three, but here I mention only two. Urban citizenship, which I will discuss. Expertise or knowledge, which is very important, and care. Okay, and I will present the argument in a few minutes so you will understand. I will speak a little bit about our methodology, okay, give you the local context of Tel Aviv, and especially during the crisis, the pandemic. And then I will discuss MSOs, which is a concept that we've, it's like NGOs, okay, so non-governmental organizations, but because they are dealing primarily or exclusively with immigrants, we are conceptualizing them as migrant or immigrant serving organizations. And the argument is that their expertise, what we call sometimes in the literature vernacular expertise, because they are so knowledgeable about the immigrant communities in both cities, they know them personally, they know a lot about their culture, they know a lot about their needs, their problems, which is something the cities and the governments in both countries didn't have that type of expertise before the pandemic and during the pandemic. And so they needed the skills and the expertise of the organizations in order to care for migrants, to take care of their needs. Okay, so that's basically what we're doing. And then at the end, a few words of conclusion. So let me start by saying that MSOs, migrant serving organizations, are very important, crucial actors, not just during crisis. I don't know enough about the situation in Brazil or in Belo Horizonte or Sao Paulo, but in most European countries, as well as in Israel, especially when we talk about refugees, when we talk about asylum seekers, NGOs or MSOs are critical because the governments and the municipalities don't want or cannot help migrants with some of their needs. It can be something as simple as food. It can be health insurance. It can be education, different things. So MSOs are, if you will, they are the bridge. They are the providers of a lot of rights and services, okay, to immigrants. Now, as you can imagine, during crisis, their role becomes even more important. You remember, I will talk about it in a minute. Again, I'm not sure what the situation was here during COVID, but in most cities that I know, mobility was forbidden, right? In many cases, immigrants were sent out of the country. They were fired from their jobs. There were a lot of problems, and especially what we call the weakest, most precarious populations suffered the most. And immigrants and refugees and asylum seekers are usually the most sensitive populations. And so if we, as citizens of our countries, suffered, they suffered double and triple and so on. Now, what we are arguing or what we say is that the capacity of organizations during COVID, even though they had expertise of their own and knowledge of their own, they couldn't work, obviously, alone because they were dependent on their interface, their connections, their links, both with the government of the city. Doesn't matter if it's Tel Aviv or Copenhagen or Berlin. Berlin, by the way, I didn't say it. Berlin was the third city that we analyzed. So we had a colleague in Germany, and he and his team were doing the data collection in Berlin. So in all cities, and we assume that in other cities as well, it's very important to interface, to have connections, because organizations alone cannot do it. Okay? But of course, the local context is very important. What can the city give? The resources, for example, of Copenhagen are different than the resources of Berlin. The migration policy of Tel Aviv or of Israel is different than the migration policy of Copenhagen. So a lot of it is dependent on the local context. And that's always, I guess, you know that, especially when you do a comparative project, it's important to look at what is going on the ground, right? Locally. So this is what I said. So local and national context matter very, very much. The migration policy or migration regime, the legal status of immigrants. In Israel, they are considered undocumented immigrants. In Berlin, they have a different legal status. Okay, they are residents who are not citizens. Okay, so that also matters, because if you can help or cannot help or provide a service or not provide a service to an individual depends very much on his local status, legal status. Can you give him benefits, insurance, if he is not working? Can you give him some kind of support, financial support? Can you see the, yeah, okay. And there are other things, public sentiments. What does the public in general feel about immigrants? It's very sad, but we all know that not in all countries, immigrants are accepted and are liked. In some places, they are stigmatized, they are discriminated against, they are not given rights, and especially during crisis, they are the scapegoats, as they say. They are blamed. There are no jobs. There are no, our children are scared. The neighborhoods you live in are not safe, and so on and so forth. So all of these things are very important, and I will speak about some of them. So like I said, this paper focuses on the role of organizations, but especially what we are interested is in their knowledge and expertise, why they were so critical during the pandemic, okay? And why they were so critical to connect or mediate between the ethnic communities of the immigrants and the city or the state, because at the end of the day, eventually, organizations don't have resources. Organizations cannot give unemployment grants to people who are fired. They don't have the money. The government has the money, but somebody needs to convince the government to do it. So this is the basic sort of objective of the paper. So just very quickly, because I don't want to spend too much time on theory. It is important, but it's more important when we write the paper and not when we speak. Urban citizenship. Okay, for people who are not in the sociology or geography or urban studies literature, I would just say that since the middle of the 1990s, so about 30 years, there is what we call an urban turn in citizenship studies. So you and I, all of us, we are citizens of a country, right? Brazil or Germany or Israel and so on. But since the 1990s, there is an understanding that we are also citizens of the city. Now, of course, we don't have a passport of the city, but we are entitled, to receive services from the municipality. We have the right to live in neighborhoods, and we have the right to receive, in many countries, it's the city that provides education, not the state, right? So UC, which is the acronym of urban citizenship, is very important in the literature because on citizenship, because it's not just the national level, the regional and local level is very important. And what the idea behind urban citizenship is primarily, or not primarily, but especially important for immigrants. Why do you think that is? Why are immigrants, let me throw the question at you, why are immigrants, the idea of urban citizenship is more important for them than maybe for us? Because of their status. In many European countries, and the group that I will speak about in Tel Aviv, they are not citizens. They can live in Berlin or they can live in Copenhagen for 20 or 30 years and have kids and have jobs, but they are not legal. And so the governments can say, wait a second, you are not our citizens. Why should we care about you? Why should we give you resources? Why should we let you sign up your children to schools? You are not citizens. This is exactly where the concept of urban citizenship comes into the picture. Because what scholarship is saying is that if you live in a place, you should have the rights, the most basic rights, to be able not just to survive, but to prosper. Even if you don't have a passport or an official ID of the country. Why? Because it's a basic human right. I don't care where you came from. I don't care if you entered legally or illegally. I don't care what your status is. You should be able to eat. Your children should be educated. You should have you should have the right to be employed. Because if you don't have a job, then how are you expected to feed your family? And so on and so forth. So what urban citizenship does, in a way, is to disconnect your legal status from the rights and services that you are entitled to get, just because you are a person, not because you hold any document in your pocket, okay? Sorry. So like I said, urban citizenship are the rights, and so this is very simple, I'm simplifying it, but just for the purpose. Rights and services provided to migrants and other precarious groups, regardless of their legal status. I don't care who you are. You're a person, that's what matters to me, that a person who lives in my territory, okay? And basically what it means, or what we are trying to do here, is to say that organizations are providing, especially during the crisis, during the pandemic, they were the providers of care to immigrants, and they helped them survive the very, very difficult time that existed, what was it, 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago. So But what we were especially interested, like I said before, I won't get to it too much, is what kind of knowledge or expertise or skills organizations had that helped them to help and care for migrants. That was our entry point. That was what was interesting to us. Okay? So I'm going to skip that. There's a literature about expert citizens. I'm skipping that. But we know that professional NGOs or MSOs can act as expert citizens. Okay, they have the knowledge. They live in they live or interact with immigrant communities and so on. And we were using, again, this is theory, so it's not that important, but we very much like the concept of vernacular experts, which was coined about 6 years ago, which basically talks about, it's not an expert in the sense of, I don't know, a professor or a medical doctor or an engineer. It's expert in the sense of the very everyday, informal, and locally embedded, meaning he or she or they, the organizations, know the context. They know the local environment. They know how to navigate the bureaucracy. Even the very simple thing, they speak the language. Immigrants don't very often, and asylum seekers, especially if they are only 2, 3, 4, 5 years in the country, they don't necessarily speak the language. So it's a problem every day, but it's an even bigger problem during a pandemic. When, I guess, when in Brazil they wanted to immune the population, right? The publication was done in Portuguese. Great. And it was put online in Portuguese websites of the government. But what if you don't speak Portuguese? What if you you cannot even read Portuguese to know or listen to the radio to know that the information is available online? Sounds basic. Who doesn't know? You have friends, you go to school, parents, family, not networks, you listen to the TV, the radio, you know that you get that information. Immigrants don't. Who will make sure that 20, 30, 40, 100,000 immigrants from I don't know what country get that information and come to get the shots? That's just a simple example, okay? To the sensitive and precarious situation of immigrants always, but especially when it's a crisis situation, a pandemic, which you remember, it's not just an epidemiological crisis, it became an economic crisis and social crisis and so on. Okay, so, sorry, the other way. So this is just something we all remember. During COVID, cities and governments limited services and rights of everybody, even us as citizens, but especially non-citizens. Mobility, right? I don't know how it was here, but in my city and for a long time, you couldn't get out more than 500 meters from your house. People were trying to get to the beach. They weren't allowed. People were trying to get to their friends who live a kilometer away. It wasn't possible. So our personal mobility was limited. And then there were other things. Education, schools were closed, right? Kindergarten were closed. Employment, this is something that is extremely, extremely important for immigrants. Again, I don't know what the situation is here, but in Israel, almost 100%, I don't want to say 100%, of the asylum seekers, of the refugees, what industries do they work in? They don't work in biotechnology and high technology, right? What industries they work in? Yeah, restaurants, hotels. What were the first businesses that were shut down? exactly those businesses. Restaurants were shut down, also movie theaters and so on. But so in terms of employment, they were very much, migrants were especially hard hit. We all suffered. I'm not saying I suffered as well, because all of my kids had to study from home. I don't know if it was here like that you did Zoom, which was for parents was a big headache, a pain. I don't want to say where, a pain, but at least my children had laptops. They used one of my laptops, and their teachers taught them, because we have internet connection and we have laptops and we have 3 different rooms that my oldest daughter could sit in one room, my other son in another, and my youngest in another. But when you live, and I'll talk about it in a minute, when you live in a very small apartment and your parents cannot help you, I spent I don't know how many hours trying with the technical problems that they had with the laptops. Okay, but I know a little bit about computers. I'm not an expert. But when your parents don't have the skills, they don't have the laptop, and they don't have the wireless, it doesn't matter if the school offers classes, because the children cannot sign in. That's the end. And for 6 months or 8 months, the children are at home, and no education, no schooling. Okay, so especially hard hit because they're stigmatized, they're discriminated, they have very little social networks, they almost don't engage with locals, and they have very or little knowledge, for example, of the language, which is, especially at times of crisis, communication is key. You don't speak the language, you are left out. And sometimes it could be the difference between being alive and not surviving. Okay. So, like I said, organizations were left with almost the only one to assist them, and their access to immigrant communities were very critical. So the kind of connection we are making here is between the need, basic needs, food, okay, expertise of the organizations, the care that they provided, that was manifested in the rights and services provided, and that was essentially how they maintained or helped immigrants maintain their urban citizenship. Okay. So very quickly, the methodology, I'll put it all up here. Like I said, 3 case study, international research projects. These were the, where is this here? These are the 3 cities, okay? Comparative urbanism is what we did here. We focused on organizations that served the most marginalized migrants. In our case, it was asylum seekers from mostly 2 countries. I'll mention it in a minute: Sudan and Eritrea. Okay, 2 countries in the Horn of Africa that settled in Israel in around 2008, 9, 10, about 15 years ago. We did interviews with organizations and with activists, people in the Eritrean community we spoke with. We interviewed them in English, of course. Everything was done by Zoom because the whole research took place during the pandemic, so we were also limited. Okay? And we did ethnography, so when we could, we went out to see some of the initiatives. One initiative, which I have a picture of, which was really very kind of heartwarming, was a food bank. A food bank that was established, and supermarkets and other businesses donated food, not just food, but canned beans and bread and everything else, and fruits and vegetables, and anybody could come, especially immigrants and refugees, and take no charge. Okay, for months. I'll show you a few pictures. So that was also part of the research. When we could, we went out. When the limitations allowed us to get out of our homes, we did that. And then we analyzed the data. And again, I already said that, but we use MSOs and not NGOs because we think it's a much more appropriate term. It's like an umbrella term. It's much wider. So what is the local context in Tel Aviv or in Israel? There are about 10,000 Sudanese and Eritreans. They are considered a non-deportable population. They live in the country since 2007. So during pandemic, it was almost 15 years. Now it's close to 20. And they have, this is their status. I don't know if you heard the term once, TCP means temporary collective protection. What does it mean? It's supposed to be a good thing, but it's not always. Temporary collective protection means when there is a big flow, a big wave of refugees, the government doesn't have, not just our government, any government, doesn't have time to check one by one. You know, what's your status? Are you really a refugee? Are you not? So in crisis situations, when a lot of immigrants come at one time, governments can decide to say, okay, you know what? We know the situation in Syria is horrible. We know the situation in Venezuela is horrible. We know the situation in Afghanistan is horrible. So anybody who comes to the border with a passport of those countries, we don't ask questions. We let them in and we give them the TCP, which means until the situation in their country improves, they are allowed to stay here. They're not refugees, but they are getting very, very similar rights. So they can get housing for discount. They can send their kids to public schools, and so on and so forth. It doesn't mean that they will stay there forever. That's why the T. That's why it's temporary. Because we say, okay, there is a civil war in Syria, so all the Syrians who cross the border now to Turkey, fine. 2 million, 3 million, you can stay. Okay, or Ukrainians who cross the border in 2022 to Poland. Stay. When the situation improves, you can go back. Now, what is the big problem? I said that it's good and not good. It's good because you let people stay. It's not good because if the conflict continues and you don't give them a formal legal status, that they can continue to live for years in this, as we say, gray area. It's not black and it's not white, right? It's not you're illegal and you're not fully legal. So you're like in this, you know, in the middle, stuck in the middle. And unfortunately, the government of Israel, on purpose, didn't want this group to remain forever. So they never bothered to legalize their status and formalize their status. Okay? They have no political rights. Of course, they cannot vote to the city or to the government. Very, very few social rights. So social security, for example, is not something that they access. You have social security or something like that, like a national security? Okay. What is social security? If it was especially important during the pandemic, because a lot of my colleagues, for example, who worked for the airlines, okay, they worked as a flight attendant, okay, or teachers. They were fired, or they weren't fired, but they were sent home. What can you do with a flight attendant when there's no flights? But for 6 months, if you were a citizen, you could get Social Security. It's not 100% of your salary, 70%, 80%. Okay, better than nothing, right? Now, Nobody knew in March 2020 how long the pandemic is going to go. 2 months? 3 months? 2 years? Nobody knew. So they are ineligible for Social Security. So they were kicked out from their jobs. Restaurants were closed from yesterday. They were still working. Today, no, that's it. They're not serving. They were sent home. No Social Security. No Social Security means no job, no income. Now, we are not talking about people who had even savings. So how are you gonna buy your next meal? How are you gonna go to the supermarket? There are other issues, but I'll tell you later. So unemployment benefits. My friends who were citizens were able to get it, no problem. Right, they had to live a little more frugally, as they say, because the income was a little less. But still, plus they had their families. So, if you're in a deep problem, you have parents, you have brothers and sisters in the country. You can ask for a loan. You can take a loan from the bank. Yeah, that's also an option. Take a loan of whatever money, of whatever amount, and return it in 2 years when you get your job back. But if you don't have a bank account, who's going to give you a loan? Okay? So what they had to do is always, not just during the pandemic, they had to rely on NGOs or MSOs who facilitate their access to basic rights and services, like I said, health, food, insurance. And when the pandemic hit in March, they were faced with multiple challenges. I'll just give a few examples. I mentioned most of them already, but I will say unemployment. Like I said, they worked mainly in hospitality, food, or cleaning industries. And those industries were shut down overnight. Okay? No jobs. If you're fired from your job, that means no cash flow or access to credit. No access to credit and no money. You can't buy food, you can't buy you can't buy wipes for your kids. One thing that, I don't know if it's mentioned below, is in one of our interviews, we were talking to the activists, and we didn't, as citizens, we didn't even think about it, because when the pandemic hit and all the stores, they didn't close, the supermarkets, I don't know, it was probably like this here. The supermarkets didn't close, they just stopped seeing customers, right? So everything became like a delivery. Now, how do you pay for delivery? Credit card. My father, for example, lives in a different city and he was 85 at the time. And I did, of course, delivery for us, for my family. But my father also needed, he lives in an old age home. So I picked up the phone, I took his credit card number, and I ordered for him. And then they delivered it to the other city from the supermarket in his town. But what if you don't have credit card? So I remember that when they told us, the representatives from the organization, I said, my God, I didn't even think about it. For us, it's a pain, okay, because you have to do delivery, and sometimes instead of picking your apples, you rely on the person to pick the apples for you. Big deal. But at least you get the food on time. But if you don't have a credit card, because you don't have a bank account, where are you going to get your food from? Okay? So, and things that are not just food, like I said, if you have a baby and you need what is it called? Forgot the word in English. Diapers. Thank you. Diapers. Yeah, you need diapers. Babies cannot wait for the pandemic to be over. They need diapers every day, every hour, and so on and so forth. A lot of challenges. No money. No rent. No rent. The local owner, the landlord, he doesn't care that there's a pandemic. He bought an apartment in this neighborhood in Tel Aviv, and he rented the apartment to a family of immigrants, he wants X amount of money every month. He needs it too. He says, it's my investment, it's my property. I don't care that you don't work. So I can give you 2 weeks. Okay, so you don't pay January 1st, you pay January 15th or February 1st. But that's it, buddy. After that, you're out of here. Now think about it. A family living in a very small apartment. We're not talking about villas or mansions. We're talking about small, crappy, excuse my language, apartments with 5 or 6 people. Both at the same day, the mother and the father are fired. No social security, no cash flow. Now what? And the landlord calls them 2 weeks after the pandemic starts and he says, all right, what's going on with my rent? Okay, so next week and so on. So another issue was that they were threatening to evict them. Eventually, most of them were not evicted, but the threat was there. And something I already mentioned, government information didn't reach them. Or if it reached them, it was not translated. The Sudanese, just the word, the Sudanese and Eritreans in refugees, they speak at least 2 or 3 languages. Okay? Now, think about it this way. If the government so many years doesn't want to regularize them, do you think they're going to make an effort during the pandemic when they have 10 million people, 10 million citizens to take care? They will bother to invest money in translating information? It was the last thing they cared about. 10,000 people, 20,000 people, who cares? You know? We have 10 million people, and anyways, for citizens of Israel, we need at least 4 languages because you need Hebrew, you need Arabic, you need Russian, because Israel has quite a large Russian immigrant population. And for Jews Israeli Jews who are immigrated from Ethiopia, you also need the local language there. So at least 4 languages. So somebody is going to bother with translating it to Eritrean. The only ones who cared and knew and worked on it were the organizations. So, and finally, also something I mentioned in a different way, children out of school, basic things, no laptops, internet connection that they needed to study by Zoom. Okay, so I'm not gonna, because I already talked about it, I won't give you too much. I don't want to flood you with the empirical information, with the data, but the thing that we heard very often from our interviewers was this sentence at the top here. It was clear they needed us. So the situation was so critical for the immigrants that all of a sudden, organizations overnight became, and I'll talk about it in a minute, became from very, I don't want to say hated, but very organizations with a very negative image. All of a sudden, they became necessary. The government and the city needed them badly. So this is from a book, and I'll just say that over the years, this started long before COVID. Organizations developed alternative channels to integrate migrant workers in different public systems, providing them multiple benefits and services regardless of their legal status. This was written 20 years ago. But the thing is that organizations were very often sidelined or denigrated. In other words, the government didn't like them and the city didn't like them. Very often they were talked about in the media as leftist organizations that are helping the Sudanese and Eritreans stay here. The far right, the extreme far right, was even more hostile. They said, what you're doing, you're bringing in or you're supporting illegal immigration. Because you are helping them, you are encouraging them to stay. Don't help them. We don't want them here. We want them out. That was basically the perception towards organizations until March 2020. Now there's a question, and I'll say about it something in the end, whether they are again suffering from this image. But at least during COVID was a turning point because organization had an infrastructure, what we call social material infrastructure. They knew immigrants. They actually talked to them. They met with them every day. They helped them. They knew their children. They were running, I don't know, probably you have it here too, after school programs. Children who are 6, 7, 5 years old, both of their parents are asylum seekers. They don't work like most citizens that I know, 9 to 5 or 8 to 4. They work very different, shifts, long days in a hospital, cleaning, or in a restaurant, cooking or doing the dishes. It could be 9, 10, 12 hours. Both parents work. What do you do with 2 small children under the age of 6? Where do you keep them? So the organizations had infrastructure, not very sophisticated, but they had small clinics, for example, where they gave treatment to immigrants who didn't have health insurance. Okay? The day before I left last week, I went to my local clinic and I got the flu shot. I try to do it every year, especially before I get on an airplane, because I don't want to catch all kinds of things. An immigrant cannot do it because it doesn't have health insurance. I can do in 5 minutes. I just go, blah, blah, blah. The nurse sees that I'm a citizen. I give her my ID. That's it. I get the shot. I leave after 10 minutes. An immigrant cannot do it because he doesn't have a legal status. So the organizations about 20 years ago, almost in 2002 or 3, opened what they called an open clinic. Anybody can come in from the immigrant community, get the shots. If, God forbid, something more serious happens, if he has the flu, if he has, if he hurt his leg, he can come, and doctors, volunteers, will check him and give him the cure. Okay? Medicine or whatever, free of charge. The other thing that they had, and that's why they were so necessary and needed, the other thing they had was they had the trust and knowledge of the community. Now, why is trust so important? Think about it. Even when the government said, yes, it's fine, come and we will give you the inoculation, we'll give you the shot for COVID. How many people who don't have a legal status and all they hear for 15 years is that they are hated and we don't want you here, you are foreigners, you are unwanted, get the hell out of here, excuse my language. If you put yourself in their shoes, if you get an announcement from the government or from the city, yes, please come on this day and day, and somebody official will give you the shot. Will you trust them? Of course not. In 20 years, you never had one positive experience with them. So that was something that was said to us by activists. They said the problem was that even when the government or the city wanted to do the right thing, most of the community didn't trust them. They didn't want to come. I'll show you a picture in a minute. In every time they published this call, they had to say, It doesn't matter what is your status. You can come, and the not the military police, the border police will not be present. People don't trust them. But now it's kind of a strange situation. The government has an interest that they will get the shot, because otherwise they will spread the virus. I don't know if you remember, but everybody was hysterical in March and April and May, at least the first year. I was hysterical too. Everybody, we didn't know what was going on. People were especially older people and very young people died. What do you know where this is going to lead, this strange virus? So on the one hand, you have the government now have an interest that people, especially immigrants, but also others, will come to get the shot, to get vaccinated. But your customers don't want to come, because for so many years you show them that you don't like them, that you don't trust them, so they don't trust you. This is exactly where this is what the other thing was the acuteness of the situation. It's an emergency. You cannot vaccinate 50% or 30% of the population. You can, but then you know, it's like you did nothing, because other people who are not vaccinated will give you the disease, the virus. So what we're saying, that the expertise of the organizations were extremely valuable. They were basically the brokers between state institutions and immigrants. They were the ones who made sure to encourage migrants to come, to tell them it's not, nobody's going to deport you. They were the ones, I think it's in the next slide. These are some examples, okay, and that I talked about. So this is, for example, the food bank. I mean, it seems like a simple thing. What's a food bank? It's like a small grocery store. All the products here are a few, I don't know, thousands or tens of thousands of the local currency. It's nothing. But for the first time, somebody actually had a menu for them in, you can't read, but it's in Tigrinya, the local language in Eritrea, and in Arabic, which is the local language in northern Sudan. Okay? This was a command center that the organizations put together or established together with the city. There were volunteers sitting there all 24/7. Some of the volunteers, you can't see from here, were speaking the local languages of the immigrants. That is something that in almost 15 years that they were in the country didn't happen. Okay? These are the calls that I mentioned before. 4 languages. Okay, this is Tigrinya, this is Arabic, and English. Okay? See, this is dated August 21, so that's like a year and a half. The vaccination center in the name of the neighborhood is open to statusless and uninsured individuals. Okay? Meaning you can come. Who can get vaccinated? Basically, it's a little it's fuzzy here, but basically saying anybody, and saying that it's safe to come. And when something like this comes from an organization and not from the Ministry of Interior, it's looked at very differently. It's like a friend is inviting you to a dinner party and an enemy is inviting you to a dinner party. That was the big difference. So trust and knowledge. It doesn't take much. I mean, 3 languages. How difficult? Well, today you can do it using Google Translate, right, or ChatGPT. But In 20 years, the government didn't bother to do anything like that. Okay? So basically, they were building networks. This is, I have a couple more slides and I'll finish. Building networks. They responded very quickly, organizations. They formed intersectoral collaborations, on the one hand with the city and the state, on the other hand with the migrant communities. A few things that were done and were very nice and didn't cost a lot of money was to digitalize services. Until the pandemic, an asylum seeker who wanted to register their children to school had to come to the office. For, I don't know, 15 years at least, citizens were able to sign up their children to school online. Immigrants, the government says, yeah, why not? Let's, as if they have a lot of free time, right? Let's make them come to the office. So they've been doing it since 2007. During the pandemic, the organizations hired a few tech people, and they got the consent of the city, and they digitalized the registration. This is something that can be done in like 2 days. I mean, this is not nuclear physics. So very simple things. So school registration. And the important thing, like I said, local and national authorities had to rely on organizations. I'm going to skip this. Trust relations were extremely important. And I have to say another thing, which is because the communities, migrant communities in Tel Aviv were kind of small, 10,000 or 12,000 people, it's not a lot of people, a lot of them knew each other. So they had internal communication. So some of them opened WhatsApp groups in order to pass on information from one another. And see the bottom, but anyways. This is one of the vaccination centers that I showed you before. So these are people from the, basically giving them the shots. And you see, I don't know if you remember those ridiculous masks and everything that we had to endure during that period. Just quickly, 2 examples of things people told us. It's nothing new, but it's in the words of the interview is, it was clear, I'll start here. It was clear that they needed us, organizations, because the city wasn't familiar with how to deal with the community, how to collect data, how to make information accessible. Who are the main activists through which messages could be sent out, disseminated? How to even approach the community, what kind of messages would work? They were mostly helped by us, referred to us. We became the answer to everything. We received unambiguous backup. And the guy at the top, we can speak to them. Who can speak to them? Somebody had to do this sort of bridging to the community, this cultural and linguistic accessibility, because we know the community, because our long-lasting work and our place inside the community gave us the advantage during the emergency. Okay? So just by way of concluding, what we are tackling here is the crisis knowledge care nexus. We really ask what is knowledge and whose knowledge is important during crisis. I talked about this vernacular expertise. The urban scale was very important. Cities were extremely important. During COVID, this is what sometimes in geography we call everyday geographies, right? I mean, we all live in a country, but really our lives, our everyday lives are happening in the city. Your university is in the city, most of your friends are in the city, your family is in the city, your shopping center, everything you do is in the city. That is the scale that is important, not that you're a Brazilian citizen. That's important too when you go to the airport and fly to a different country or something like that. The big question, and we can already answer it to some extent, is the question of sustainability. Will this last? And the answer is that unfortunately, most of the services, most of the trust that existed between the community and the state during COVID is lost again. Many of the services that were provided were canceled. And I think in some ways, we see a return to post-COVID policy or times, pre-COVID, sorry, not post. There are some policy recommendations. I'm not going to read them. You can look at yourself, but definitely strengthen connections. Trust relations are important. Digital infrastructures, critical, especially during a crisis like COVID that nobody foresees. We think that the COVID was a window of opportunity. Unfortunately, I can say today, 5 years or 4 years later, it was a window of opportunity that was opened and closed very quickly. And as we know, all of us, health is much more than medicine. It's not just epidemiology. And there's definitely a need to, and I'm still shocked 5 years later that they didn't build on COVID as an opportunity to provide the most simple thing: health rights, health insurance, universal health insurance to immigrants. That's, in my mind, it's still not, I can't really understand. I mean, I can understand, but it's just, so I'll stop here, okay? Thank you.
Hello. Thank you so much for the presentation. It was really good. As you're saying about the migrant situation in Tel Aviv, I was thinking that here we have the same situation now, and I don't know if I understood it well, but the situation that you're saying about the migrants in Tel Aviv was like before the pandemic. And in Brazil, we have the same situations now. I live next to here, and there is a guy that lives next to me. He is Venezuelan, and he has the same jobs that you were saying. He cleans the cars. He work as a waiter in a bar, a local bar, and he gives Muay Thai classes, and he suffers the same things. He lives in a house, like a place that has like 6 rooms, and he has 2 child, and he lives there with his wife. So it's the same situation that you're saying about people there. And I want to ask you if you already said the window was closed. You already said that the window was closed, but I want to know if you have seen an improvement since the pandemic and all.
That's an excellent question. It's a very sad question because unfortunately it's the reality. Everywhere we give this talk, people say very similar things. Even in the most developed countries, even in Austria or in Germany, or if things improved, no. Bottom line, no. Like I said in the previous slide, in many cases we even see a deterioration, things becoming worse. And I have to say that the last 3 years, when we have a right-wing government, and even more right-wing, it's not like during that pandemic it wasn't right-wing, but it was more like central, kind of soft right. Now it's much more extreme. And as you can imagine, foreigners are looked very negatively, usually by right-wing governments. That's the sad situation. So in many respects, the situation become worse. But yeah, the reality of your neighbor that you describe, that's exactly almost, it's a mirror image of what we have seen. The only thing I would say, and then again, this is not, it's not comforting me, but I think what happened was that since the pandemic, a lot of refugees or asylum seekers, they're not really, I'm saying refugees, but they're not refugees, because a refugee is someone who has the right to stay, and he or she is entitled to all the services and rights, except maybe to vote for the parliament. But who cares about that when you're trying to survive? So what was I saying? I lost my train of thoughts. Oh yeah, why it got worse? Because not it got worse. The solution, I think, that a lot of asylum seekers found is to simply leave Israel. So there are all kinds of schemes and programs. Usually they are sponsored by the UNHCR, the UN High Commission for Refugees in Geneva, to say, okay, every 6 months or every year, we have a quota of, 2,000 individuals, and we will assist them to leave Israel and settle in, Sweden or Canada or something like that. As far as the rights and the status of asylum seekers, the TPC that I mentioned, the temporary protection status, temporary collective protection, TCP, is still in place. Some things have improved, but it's very minor, and it's I cannot say that if something like that happens again, then yeah, that it, they'll be in a better position.
Hello, I'm Brenda. Thank you so much for this lecture, Professor. It's a pleasure to have you here. So I was thinking about, because we have a project here in this university which welcomes, which receives migrant people from all over the world, especially from Venezuela, from Bolivia, as well, from Peru, from Haiti, from a lot of places. But one thing that we've been realizing these days is that the Belo Horizonte City Hall is getting used to give the job, let me say like this, to the projects that work in this area, projects like these MSOs. I don't know if here we call it like that. I don't know if we have a name for this here, but it's basically organizations, popular organizations or projects in universities that welcomes these people, these migrant people. And I've been thinking, because we have another professor here from, she's actually from Mozambique, but she works in Portugal. And she said that to us. She asked me that because we were talking about our project. We all here work in this project, all three of us here, yes. And she said that to me, and this cracked a thing in my head, because I wasn't thinking like that. Like, is the public, the government that is responsible for that? And they are not doing, because here in Belo Horizonte, at least, there is a lot of organizations and projects that work with that. So I would like to know if you guys in Israel, or maybe in Berlin and Copenhagen, maybe there's something like that over there as well. Yes, like I don't know how to say exactly that in English, but something like transferring the responsibility to the organizations that are used to do it already, especially because of this construction of community, this idea of community.
Yeah, that's an excellent question, because one of the things that one of the things that we heard during the interviews by some of our subjects was that for many years, not just during COVID, that is the solution of the government. We are not going to do anything. We're not going to support you, and certainly not going to support the immigrants. If you want to do it, it's your choice. So in many respects, what you are saying is absolutely true. Also in Israel, the transferring of responsibility to organizations. I should say two things. First of all, sometimes if the government is not standing in the way, it's a good start. At least let us do our job, okay? And don't prevent us, for example, from raising funds overseas. Because a lot of these organizations, as you can probably understand, neither the government nor the city support them. Their budgets and the budgets, I saw their annual budgets. It's a joke. It's amazing what they can do with the little money that they. But it's the Volkswagen Foundation, and it's the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation, and they raise funds mostly from non-local sources. So if the government is not helping, at least don't stand in their way. The other thing, and that's one thing I should say, and this is for the something very positive. The city of Tel Aviv is the only city in Israel that has an organization that serves immigrants. Now, it's sort of this weird structure. It's a unit that belongs to the city, but they only receive some of their budget from the city. The rest, they have the liberty to get money elsewhere, from donations abroad and so on and so forth. So I should give this to them, to their credit, I should say, but it's the only country, as the only city in the country. And there were times that about 80 or 90% of immigrants lived in Tel Aviv, but it's no longer the case. Now they are scattered all over the country. And one of the things that we heard from the people in that unit that we interviewed, she said the curious thing is that during pandemic, she got phone calls from other municipalities saying, what do you guys do? How do you handle it? And she told them, we didn't start today. We have 15 years of experience. So we know almost virtually every family, where they live and what their needs are and how many kids they have and where their kids go to school and so on and so forth. So for us, it was the information, the databases. It wasn't like in 1 second, but we knew where to start. So these are the two things I would say. First, there was at least a hope that other cities will learn from the experience of Tel Aviv and at least make some effort to create an organization that does it on a continuous basis, not just when pandemic hit. And two, I should say that unfortunately at the national level, the national scale, they, with a very short hopeful period during the pandemic, I don't think any of the organizations think that the policy is going to change or that they're going to receive more support from the government, and they continue to work under the assumption that yes, the responsibility is transferred to them. Yeah, that's as sad as it sounds. This window, like I said, this short window or narrow window of opportunities closed years ago or months ago.
Yeah. Thank you.
Eu vou falar em português para poder quebrar, né? E aí o pessoal ficar mais à vontade também para poder perguntar. Aí, você quer perguntar? Eu posso perguntar o Nir, você traduz então? Obrigada pela explanação. eu queria entender algumas questões estruturais da pesquisa que eu não consegui perceber. E a primeira questão, eu gostaria que você voltasse no conceito de vernacular, conhecimento vernacular, que eu não entendi isso, porque para a gente é algo muito assim, vem lá de outras gerações.
Ok.
E a outra coisa que eu achei muito interessante é que você começou a mostrar a contextualização da pesquisa, e eu não entendi se essa contextualização ela foi uma leitura que que a equipe fez dos... onde que ela buscou os dados para fazer essa contextualização? Porque ele falou que ia fazer uma entrevista, né? E aí eu não entendi. Sabrina, você quer voltar? Tá.
She'd like to know a little bit more, and especially who was interviewed.
Oh, who was interviewed? Okay.
And how this interview helped them to describe the context of the contextualization of the research. And a terceira pergunta é por que vocês escolheram as organizações? Na verdade, a pergunta é onde que está a universidade, né? Porque aqui no Brasil a gente tem... Because in Brazil, the universities, there are many extension projects that help the immigrants. And why? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Working with migrants.
Yeah.
Three questions, and then Sabrina will ask.
After that, okay. Thank you. Thanks for the questions, Vivi. I will just say one more thing with respect to the previous question. MSOs is not. You said that you don't know if you have a concept for that here. It's in most of the literature on immigration, they simply call them NGOs. Okay, so during the crisis of 2015 in Europe, where refugees from Afghanistan and Iraq and so on and so forth, there were the research that was published afterwards about it talked about NGOs working in Warsaw or working in Berlin or working in whatever, London. Okay, so MSOs is just I should say maybe one thing about it. We felt that MSOs was more appropriate than NGOs because, like I said, that unit in the city of Tel Aviv and also in Berlin is not really non-governmental. It's in some respect it is governmental. So it's this sort of hybrid creature. So we felt that that was a more appropriate concept. About universities, there are projects, maybe it's the same here, but they are very short term. They're usually at the height of the peak of the crisis. What I should say to the credit of some Israeli universities is that they have what we call clinics. Almost every university has a clinic that deals with different issues. What is the idea of a clinic? It means that students and faculty provide advice, and usually legal advice and legal support to different groups. So, for example, in my university, there's a environmental regulation, I think, or something like that, and clinic. And what they do is, if a certain community, for example, needs environmental impact assessment report. I don't know if you've heard of that. It's basically a report that you have to, by law, to produce whenever a new project is planned. So what are the environmental impacts of the project? Are you going to contaminate the water? Is it going to contaminate the water? Is it going to contaminate the air? So there are different clinics, but I don't think, as far as I can recall right now, there are no clinics to work especially with migrants. In this case, the organizations, the MSOs, have their own clinics. So there is one organization called Hotline for Workers, or labor hotlines, something that has to do with legal rights in the labor market. If you get fired, or if your boss is abusing you, if you're a citizen, it's not a problem. You know, you can hire a lawyer and you can sue them. But if you're an immigrant, what do you do? So that's one clinic that helps, for example, immigrants. And there are other. I mentioned it's really an organization that it's like Doctors Without Borders kind of things. I'm sure you heard of it. Physicians for Human Rights or something like that. Clinic, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times a week that has that it's open for the public. Anybody can come. You're not obliged to show your ID. Nobody cares where you come from. They just provide you with the services. And if it's emergency, they will refer you to the ER, and someone will even go with you to the ER. Because again, no health service, no health insurance. Okay, the children do get health insurance, but not the adults. Interviews, I didn't spend too much time on that. We had 15 different organizations that all of them are in the city of Tel Aviv, in downtown Tel Aviv. The good thing about is that it was actually helpful for us. They are all located almost in the same street and even in the same building. It's at the heart of the migrant community because, again, they don't have cars. They cannot travel to another city. Everything has to be embedded in the community. So there were 17 individuals, 15 people. I think about 13 were from organizations, 2 or 3 or 4 were activists, because we felt we needed to speak to activists from the Eritrean and Sudanese communities. So they were very helpful. One of them actually works as this is his job even before the pandemic. He works as a translator in a few organizations. That's what he does. He translates from Tigrini to Hebrew or to English if necessary. And so we also interviewed, for example, the manager of UNHCR in Israel, the High Commissioner for Refugees. You know, there's a UNHCR in at least one place in Brazil, but almost every country has it. So she gave us also important information. We talked to people from the municipality. There's one organization that defends legal rights and health rights and labor laws. I mean, there's a whole bunch of, there's one organization that deals with the education of children. I mentioned that, for example, one of the biggest problems of the asylum-seeking community is children, especially when they're young. I don't know what it's like here, but where I come from, you know, sort of middle-class sort of families, if school finishes at, I don't know, 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock or kindergarten, and parents work later, you have after-school programs. Parents pay extra money, the kids go to after-school programs. For the asylum-seeking community, that doesn't exist, okay? And so what do you do with parents who work 12, 14, 16 hours a day and 3 very small children? Where do you keep them? 3, 4, 5 o'clock. You can't leave 2 kids who are 6 and 5 or 3 and 5 at home alone, right? It's against the law. And so one of the organizations we interviewed, that's what they do. They institutionalized sort of after-school programs for children of asylum seekers. So volunteers would go to the schools or to the kindergartens after, I don't know, 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock. They will pick up the kids and they will fetch them and bring them to like a sort of a cultural center or their offices, and have a few volunteers who would play with them, work on their homework. Again, this is something we sort of, I think most of my fellow citizens keep forgetting. The kids go to schools where the language of instruction is Hebrew, but the parents don't speak Hebrew, and they certainly cannot help their children with homework because they don't speak the language. So the volunteers in those centers, that's what they do. The kids come to the centers at 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They get a hot meal there, and they help them with the schoolwork. Okay, math, whatever the subject is. So that's. I hope I can sort of share with you the actual demographics of who we spoke with, but maybe not right now. Vernacular expertise, I try to explain it. It's a kind of a slippery concept, but it's basically what we were trying to say, that it's the kind of knowledge that comes not from university. It's the sort of locally specific, almost everyday kind of knowledge that you accumulate through daily life, through being in a certain environment. So that's exactly what we were trying to say. Even though the government, I'm sure in this country as well, has very sophisticated databases, and they know every month they publish how many immigrants work in this industry or that industry. At the end of the day, they don't know the first thing about what immigrants need. For them, they are simply numbers, not even names. They don't know how many children they have. They don't know where they live. They don't know even what languages they speak. So the MSOs are, because of their continuous engagement with immigrants, it's from sort of bottom up, if you will. I don't like this top-down, bottom-up, but it's that kind of bottom-up information that only can come if you work with someone and you engage with him across a long period of time. Okay, so I hope this is more.
Bom, eu vou falar em português também, mas a minha pergunta é a seguinte: as práticas de cuidado entre migrantes tendem a ocorrer em espaços poucos visibilizados pelo planejamento urbano. Quer que eu repita? As práticas de cuidado entre migrantes tendem a ocorrer em espaços poucos visibilizados pelo planejamento urbano. Poucos visibilizados pelo planejamento urbano. Como essa invisibilidade espacial contribui para a marginalização desses sujeitos nas políticas públicas?
Yes. You're right. What affects? The invisibility of the immigrant community? Yes. How it affects?
The access of the rights.
In cities,
like they're not considered to the public services, to the public government.
no,
etc.
no,
Yeah,
they're completely invisible.
Yeah, so they are marginalized
Yeah,
because of that.
yeah.
Yes,
They-
mas pode eu acho que você está tentando dizer é que eles já estão super marginalizados, não é?
Sim.
Quando eles recebem algum tipo de cuidado, esse cuidado também se dá em espaços marginalizados.
Sim,
Então isso faz uma dupla marginalização.
exatamente.
Estou certo?
Isso.
Então, agora vamos falar isso. We will try to translate because we are trying to understand. Now you try to.
Okay, I will try, but I understand the question. How it affects, it's everything. It's first of all, it's segregation, right? Even though it's a small community, it lives in very, very designated areas. Okay, schooling is actually one of the things that is in a better situation again because there's a mandatory education law that from the age of 3 onwards, every individual, doesn't matter if he's a citizen or not, has to be in some kind of a educational framework institution. But as you can imagine, the quality, for example, of education in some of the schools that the children of asylum seekers attend is not the greatest. Plus, what happened was that initially, in the beginning, children of asylum seekers were signed up or were registered to schools that were attended by children of citizens as well. What do you suppose happened over a period of a very few years? What they call in the U.S., the context of the U.S., they used to call it the white flight. Right? White middle-class residents left schools and communities that were populated mostly by African Americans or Hispanic Americans. The same thing happened. So now you basically have 2 or 3 schools in segregated neighborhoods that are almost 100% children. And then all the other things, the invisibilities that I talked to, no health services, inability to leave the country. If you have a PCP, you don't have an ID, and you certainly don't have a passport. By the way, I think the majority of them, when they arrived, they didn't have a passport. When you run for your life, you don't really think about picking up your passport or, you just get the hell out of it as soon as you can. So no passport meaning you can't leave the country. And there are various other things that the Social Security, like I mentioned, benefit. Who will protect you again if your boss is abusive? That happens very often. And so all the things that, and then maybe for urban geographers, I think the thing that is the most sort of, I don't know if interesting is the word, but the most unusual or important is that there is almost like certain areas that the immigrants, it's like self-imposed boundaries. So they don't transcend them. They don't leave those areas. Because they know exactly what would happen if they are found after midnight in a certain neighborhood. This is not particular to Israel. This happens everywhere, especially in places where racial identity is important. So, yeah. So I would say that it's manifested in 100 ways on the way.
Ótimo, good question from a geographer.
Me apresentando, né? Meu nome é Sabrina, essa é a Isabel, ela ficou tão nervosa que não conseguiu se apresentar. Nós duas somos do curso de Geografia e, primeiramente, agradeço muito pela oportunidade, foi muito boa a palestra, conversa muito com o que a gente tem estudado, principalmente na... Perdão.
Eu me perdi na hora que você conversa muito essa palestra com o que a gente tem estudado em geografia cultural, geografia da população. Então, levantou alguns questionamentos na minha mente, trazendo também à tona algumas coisas que não foram respondidas em aula, mas foi respondida aqui. Uma coisa que me traz muito interesse é sobre apropriação da cidade. Então, a minha pergunta é relacionada a isso.
City appropriation, I mean spatial appropriation of spaces, like cultural integration.
Podemos compreender as práticas de cuidado desenvolvidas por migrantes como formas de resistência à exclusão socioespacial e à negligência do poder público? Porque tem várias.
Could we understand the health and care practices developed by migrants as forms of resistance to exclusion, social spatial exclusion? Yes, and to neglect, yes, of the public power, and in which ways does this redefine the right to decision?
It's a good question. It's a good question, but there are very, very, very few. I think you can count them on the fingers of one hand. The associations or organizations within the community. Okay. So there are a few, and we spoke to some individual, like I said, some activists. But what you have to remember is that we're talking about a population that has no legal status, is discriminated against, is segregated, and basically almost 20 years gets the impression that nobody wants them there. And so I think there were times in the beginning after they arrived in the first few years where they thought that maybe they could self-organize. I'm not saying that migrant community organizations don't exist, but they normally deal with very, very minor issues, like women creating like sort of ethnic art and selling them in order to raise funds for all kinds of things. There are, of course, networks within the community. I don't know enough about them, I have to say, because our focus was organizations and not the migrants themselves. But certainly you can't use the terminology of resistance. It's not resistance. I think it's, at best, it's everyday survival. And I think I have to say that from the perspective of the government, their strategy is working, in the sense that I think most of the asylum seekers understand that they have no horizon, they have no future. And so their best way or the best solution for them is to leave. And so I think in the peak of 2011, 2012, so on and so forth, there were about 65,000 individuals. Okay. today there are less than half. So about 30, a bit over 30,000, with about a quarter of them are children. Okay. By the way, the children are, in some respects, they are suffering no less or even more than their parents because they cannot go to university, for example. They have no legal status. It's very difficult, almost impossible for them. They cannot find government jobs. They cannot work for civil service. So it's this, like I said, this gray zone that it's almost like somebody needs to find a solution, and it seems like nobody really, certainly nobody who can find a solution really cares to find one. So yeah, I wish I could say something in terms of, you know, integration, but it's simply, it's not, yeah, with the exclusion of a few very sort of minor initiatives here and there. Thanks. I actually have a question of my own, and maybe people would like to comment or to say, because again, my collaboration so far on questions of immigration was mostly with researchers from Europe. And I don't know enough about the situation, like people already mentioned here and there, but the situation in Brazilian cities. I guess I don't know, but the largest urban magnets in Brazil are probably the usual suspects, right? Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, maybe. So what is the situation there? Not just during COVID, but, and you certainly have, I know we talked about it a little bit yesterday, a lot, oh, no, I don't know if a lot, but immigrants from neighboring countries, right? From Latin American countries, Venezuela and Bolivia, I heard, and maybe others. So how does that work on the urban level? I would be interested to hear. It's not an exam, just really out of curiosity, because I don't know enough.
No, okay. The question is, we are not from geography. We are from linguistic and literature. So, yeah, okay. But because I don't know exactly what to say, we don't know, I think so, exactly what to say about the spatial situation, but we know a bit. It's okay. Okay.
Our project is related to Portuguese teaching for migrants, and in my class, in this special, in this semester we worked about we teach them Portuguese, but reflecting about the migrants law, Brazilian migrant law. So what I can say is that since 2017, we have a new law of migration. So now it's very easy for Brazil is very open to receive migrants, so they can have the access to ID, even though they don't have their documents, but they can have it. And for example, our project, we prepare them to have the language certificate, because with the language certificate preferences, they can have the permanent, in some case, they can access to permanent residence. So they have access to the free health care. Everyone here have the access, and schools as well. So public schools,
if they don't have an ID, they can be assessed the system of health and schools too, because in Brazil, children they have to frequency in the school, attended at the school, and
Yes, because to 6 you have to your children have to be in the schools, and I think we are trying to improve these rights, because I see that some of the difficulties is, for example, the validation of their mm, diploma titles, because, for example, some of this process is still not so easy. So it's because of this they have to to exert the jobs of the kind we saw.
And about education, when the kids formerly in high school here, they can access to university, and we have one program they call Enem, that was exempt to all people who finished the high school, and in this year. Uh, our governments are studied to expand it to all Latin America. And in the last year, the migrants law are changed, and to attend the high people who became here, because Venezuela are too many peoples, and in the no in in the beginning of this year, for day we receive 600 people for day, for day, and it's great. Yes. Uh-huh. Roraima. Yes.
Yes, yes, because of the border.
Yes.
In Roraima, which makes the border with Venezuela.
Yeah.
Pacaraima is the closest city to Venezuela.
And
Almost a Venezuelan city.
yeah, yes.
People speak Spanish there.
What are the reactions of the local population of the city itself? Are they providing any support? Is there resistance?
Yes.
Part of the local
Yes, we have the SGMR, que é o Serviço Jesuíta para Migrantes e Refugiados. They help these migrants to find jobs and learning Portuguese, but our military no, it's what is that? Our army have programs to allocate people in the center in another cities, because if they don't do this, this thing, no, don't yes.
I
That's very interesting, by the way. I didn't know that, but the concentration also
no, yeah, I'd like to say that it's very interesting to see a research that's located during the COVID pandemic, because in Brazil we had a lot of chaotic organizations during this period, and research about this period is not very common, because it's almost like we collectively forgot about it, even though there are very strong impacts on our society still today. So I was thinking about how in Brazil we had
while the health professionals were saying about the importance of vaccine and the importance of quarantine, our president was saying stuff that's very anti-science and yeah, and I this those political dialogues were very intense during these times, and people were not being vaccinated because they were afraid of the vaccine. And I was wondering how this impacted also the immigrants living here, because also and during the quarantine, stuff wasn't really so strict. So people that needed to work because of their conditions of class, they would go to work and they would expose themselves to the virus. So, for example, my boyfriend's uncle, he still had to deliver supplies to restaurants and he was exposed to the virus and he died, unfortunately. So, yeah, but in Brazil, that wasn't very strict as a. So it was a very strange times where some people were hysterical and locked at home, and others were like, "This is not. This is just a virus, like a flu. So I can go wherever I want." And so, and in Brazil, like you said, in other countries, the migrants, the immigrants, they are working in precarious work. So I was wondering, this is a question that maybe we don't have the answer, right? How these populations were also more exposed to the virus and more exposed to death, you know. So maybe it's worth it to research, like us Brazilians, research how this impacted also their lives in the most fundamental way, like live or death, you know. So in Brazil, we had a very strange reaction to the pandemic. I was seeing the photographs, the health agents with all the equipment in Brazil. That was not the way, you know. So I was just wondering this, and thank you for bringing this all this information. Also about the pandemic, that's something that we all collectively kind of forgot, you know.
I'm just reminded now that I spent a few days in São Paulo before I came here, and in one of the neighborhoods, I think I mentioned it to you. It's the you told me the name of the neighborhood with the right. That's the one. Very sort of I don't know. Looks like gentrified. Very colorful. Sort of. They had on the wall. There was a big mural and I actually have a picture in my phone with a plaque. It's essentially a sort of a monument for all the casualties from Brazilian casualties from COVID. I think the plaque said, I could check, 700,000, something like 750,000, almost 750,000. Okay. Died from the virus in Brazil in the course of the pandemic. And the nice thing about the mural was that in addition to that plaque, it depicted people of different religions, races, ethnic groups, and basically it said in that little text there that it affected all Brazilians, all population groups in Brazil, regardless of ethnicity, race, and so on and so forth. So, and I thought about it. I don't think I've seen anything like that in any other country, which to me means that it, first of all, almost 750,000 people. That's a lot. I mean, that's way too much. But I don't think I've seen anywhere else in the world this sort of monument, which basically says, "Hey, this wasn't such a small thing." I think your point about the sort of, I would call it the class dimension of, it's not just legal status. That's true, but it's the class dimension of precarious workers during COVID. The fact that some of them were either obliged to go to their jobs because otherwise they couldn't survive, or because their bosses said, if you don't show up, I don't care what the what the legal decree is or what the government says, you need to be here to do whatever, bake the bread or something. So or because that was a situation, and so I think it's there were some, I saw some data. I didn't see actual research, but I saw some data about the class dimension of those who were affected. And so the fact that it was mostly people, and people who lived, for example, in more crowded housing formats.
In
right?
the favelas, Brazilian favelas.
Yeah.
There's a very interesting documentary about how the government just forgot about these people, and how in the favelas the traffic, the organized traffic had to organize themselves to politically act in the combat of the virus. So the drug traffic was giving the supplies like the masks and the other equipment, because the government just neglected these people. And I think that the reason also about this monument is because in Brazil a lot of deaths would be easily avoided. It was like a political thing to avoid the vaccine to get earlier in Brazil. So it was like an insane political decision. Yeah. She was saying that she wanted to say that it was the President Bolsonaro that was responsible for all of this. Not all, but yes. Yes.
Can I tell you about something? Because there was on Brazil one black intellectual, woman black research called Sueli Carneiro that said the problem of politicals in these situations. She researched about racial discrimination. And then she said that the question isn't a gap question when you talk about politics. It's a plan. Do you think the same when you research about the migration in Tel Aviv?
Yeah, I mean, this is not something I focused on. I said maybe once or twice the presentation. From the outset, from the beginning, it was very clear that the way the government handled this population, it was very clear that they wanted to stay indefinitely. There's actually a very famous and horrible statement of the Minister of Interior Affairs from like 2011 or so, 2012, at the peak of the migration wave. He said, maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but he said, our objective is to make their lives miserable so that they choose not to stay. It was all over the place. That's basically it. No rights. There was, speaking about geography and dispersion, that was for a very brief, how much it was been 2-3 months, a government decision that prevented immigrants from settling in the Tel Aviv metro area, especially exactly because of that rationale. We don't want large concentration. So it was a law that was actually named after the two cities that bound the metro. So it was called, the law said you can settle north of that boundary and south, but not with, so, and by the way, MSOs and NGOs appealed to the High Court of Justice, and within, I think, 2 or 3 months, they canceled the decision. Because they said, it's insane, you're sending people who have no knowledge of the culture to, and no language skills, and no jobs. They just cross the border, and and you're limiting them to the areas that are more deprived in terms of jobs, so they won't be able to find jobs. They don't have social networks. So who's going to help them find a room where they can stay the first few nights? So that was an insane decision that was canceled very quickly. But yeah, certainly. I mean, it was never even questioned that the main objective was to make the situation for them difficult, give them the minimum of the minimum that you are required by law. By the way, Israel is a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention, and the government never did anything about it. Yeah, so we're signatories. So what? They were kept, like I said, in that temporary position, which is, again, I can't say it's, it's not bad, or it wasn't bad to begin with, because it was a good, at least they didn't send them back, right? They didn't repatriate them. But it's a good solution temporarily, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, when it's obvious that the population cannot return to their countries of residence. Then a more durable solution has to be found. You cannot leave 20, 30, 40,000 people in this sort of fluid situation forever. At some point, people and individuals and their children, they want some sense of security, right? So I just read something about now the Syrian asylum seekers / refugees. I think it was in the UK, because of all the political sort of resistance in the UK to and other countries in Europe to immigration. There's a discussion now about whether Syrian asylum seekers who have been living in the country since 2011, I think the Syrian civil war started, and because the situation in Syria is allegedly improving, there's voices now that say, okay, it's time for you to go back. The country is stable, so to speak, again, and so, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen neither in the case of the Sudan or neither in the case of the Sudan or in the case of Eritrea. So, and like I said, from 2007, we're talking about people that very soon are going to mark 20, I don't want to say celebrate, but it's not really a celebration, mark 20 years of living outside their countries of origin. So, okay, so what's your long-term solution for them? Keep them in this unstable situation forever? I mean, it's a very tricky question, and I don't know what will happen with the Venezuelan streams that you're talking about. If I'm not sure what's going on exactly on the ground in Venezuela, what's the long-term situation, but if in 2 or 3 years the situation there improves, whether some of them will aspire to go back, I don't know. It's an open question, I guess, but I don't know enough about it.
Just because you said that right now, Professor, I think situation in Venezuela is probably getting worse right now because of things that's going on between United States and Venezuela. So we will be probably welcoming more people from now on. But I would like to question you, my last question, I promise, about your plans to this research in the future. Like, for instance, I don't know if you mentioned that, but do you intend to interview the migrant people themselves? Is that can you talk about a bit about it? Thank you.
As far as this project, as often happens when the money is finished, then the project is finished. But both Tatiana and I continue to work on sort of similar topics that have to do with urban citizenship of migrants. Yes, the simple answer is that we don't have any concrete plans at the moment for like a follow-up project. But I think one of the things that we continue to sort of monitor is to see what's going on since the end of COVID. Whatever happened to rights and services that were given exceptionally, are they continued to be given, and so on. As far as speaking with migrants themselves, that there's a plan. I can't say that it's very concrete. One thing that needs to be kind of taken into consideration is that it's not impossible, but it's quite difficult to access the migrant community for the very same reasons that I said. You know, lack of trust very often, feeling that and also questions of language. So there's very few languages that both we and them speak. Same thing, I think, for Copenhagen. But yeah, for now, there's no concrete plans. But hearing the voices of migrants is definitely something that we would like to do, and I encourage you to do the same. For you, you don't really have the language issue, right? Portuguese, Spanish, I'm sure you understand.
No, I was asking you this actually because we did this experience here, but just for the Belo Horizonte and Belo Horizonte City Hall and metropolitan regions. We interviewed migrant people about the conditions they live in here to know what we could do better, especially in regard of accessing the government, like making government do something about what they need to. Like for instance, we did, I think, approximately 60 interviews with people from all over the world again, but mostly people from Haiti and Venezuela. And all of them say there were a lot of people who were here for like 10 years, like a lot of time already. And a lot of them couldn't speak exactly the language yet. And that's what we try to do in Projeto Ler. But it was an interesting experience to know more and to have like proof of what we are intending to do here, in what we are intending to change here.
Maybe just as a point of, it's really to sort of encourage you and you, Raquel and Vivian, others here. I don't know, I don't remember seeing, for example, okay, let me backtrack 1 second. The literature on citizenship in general, and I would say urban citizenship specifically, and immigrants, you see, is very, very, very biased towards cities in what we call the global north. Okay? If you do a quick search, you'll see Google Scholar, you'll see US and Canada and Germany and Denmark and so on, and Austria and so on and so forth. I don't think you'll see anything about so-called global south, or countries that are a bit more I don't know, to me, interesting to see what's going on the ground in Brazilian cities or in Indian cities or in Mexican cities. Mexico is the last sort of stop, right, in the journey of a lot of Latin American immigrants on the way to the U.S. So I think there's a lot can be said and done and researched with respect to urban scale policies regarding migrants, and what NGOs are doing, what local governments are doing, and what as they called here, vernacular experts can do, everyday citizens to help immigrants. So that's something that maybe is a wake-up call to us all to go beyond the obvious and the regular sort of cities and look at other more complex maybe situations.
Yeah. One curiosity about our country, we have we did one president, Getúlio Vargas, who installed one law who the people doesn't speak in another language except the Portuguese. This occurs in 1937 and 1945. So, this was one try to focus in the nationality identity, because our history of this construction of this country was we was building with the migrants. They blood and perspiration and tears, and the black people or brown people or Asian people at all. And so in São Paulo, they have a lot presence of Japanese people and Italian too. So to talk here, Belo Horizonte, we have communities of people like IT communities and Venezuelan communities, and these are a more segregation people. But we have a Syrian club and Italian organizations to promote the events, to promote the language, and or only to get these people in a space who the identities are preserved, and it's so beautiful. So another thing is I research the about the use of technologies to teach and learn Portuguese with migrants. And in one interview, not only one, but in another, I can perceive how important are these groups, and how important are the religion spaces for these peoples, like this Islam Center in Belo Horizonte, who one student can exercise her Portuguese, because these people work all day and the night too. And so when these people have time, he pray, and he can pray in Portuguese or Arabian. And so this occurs with the evangelicals or Christians in the general. See.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I'll just say that there is, if you're interested, there's, I think, quite a bit of literature on religious spaces as spaces of community building for, especially for immigrants. Not necessarily from recent years. It can go back to the 40s and 50s and 60s in Europe and Australia and so on and so forth. Yeah, the role of religion and religious institutions is very important. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think we're good. Well, thank you so much.
Já deu. Então, eu gostaria de convidar todo mundo, porque amanhã nós vamos ter outra palestra do professor Nir, aqui também, às 10 da manhã, sobre juventudes e práticas de resistência nos espaços públicos. Então, ele vai falar um pouquinho sobre as lutas das juventudes no território. E aí, vocês estão super convidados. Mais uma vez, muito obrigada. Thank you so much.